How y'all doing? Good?
How's it going? It's good to be back in Houston.
I know.
Yeah,
It's been a while.
it has been. It has been. A couple years ago.
Yeah. Two Southern Smokes ago.
Yeah, 2 Southern Smokes ago. That was a blast. That's it right there.
That photo.
That's it.
Look at that.
Right there. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming to town.
It's a good thing I wore a different shirt. No, it's different.
It's not the
is
same.
different.
That's
No, it's
blue.
not-
That's
it's not the
great.
same. It's close. It's not the same. Yeah.
I almost wore that shirt though. So it
Close
would
enough.
have been on par.
Close
Yeah.
enough. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank y'all for coming out tonight. You guys doing all right? Good. I like this venue, huh? It's pretty damn big.
What is this? Liquid death. This is like, I'm afraid to drink this.
It's what the kids drink.
It's what the kids drink.
I don't really know, but it tastes like water.
It tastes like water. I hope it's water.
It is.
Okay.
100% sparkling water. So you've been busy.
A little bit.
I mean, and this is the last for you.
This is the last book stop for this year. Yes.
Yeah.
I may do a few more after the first of the year, but I'm done.
You're done. Yeah,
This is it. This is the last stop.
Because we just talked. You've been on the go since August.
I have been. Yeah, we shot season 22 in Toronto. Can't tell you where the finale is, but it was a great time and a really good season. One of my favorites, actually. Yeah.
Don't answer the questions yet.
It's a good season. We'll talk about that later.
This is the beauty of it. He's like, I don't want to see the questions. I don't want to know the
I don't want
questions.
no questions.
He wants to hear from you guys. So.
I love Q&A. There's absolutely nothing I won't answer. Well, maybe a few things I won't answer, but if I don't want to answer them, I'll talk around them, and I may make fun of you. I don't know.
He was like, yeah, I mean, because he was just with Emerald yesterday.
Yeah.
Past 2 days.
Yeah.
In New Orleans, and it's Emerald's foundational fiesta this weekend.
Yeah, he did his big his Carnaval du Vin, he calls it. Yeah.
And so you did a dinner on
Last night.
last night,
Yeah, last night. Yeah.
and the Q&A and the conversation.
Yesterday.
was-
So yesterday afternoon we did this. He left the stage early. He had a hard out, and I stuck around for about an hour and answered questions. So I love Q&A. So I haven't said that before. The one question please don't ask this question. I haven't been to enough restaurants in Houston to have an opinion of my favorite restaurant in Houston. So do not ask me that question because I don't know. I'm going to just ask Chris and say, what's your favorite restaurant? Because I really don't know.
And I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah. And even if I had a favorite one, I wouldn't answer it because it's not, I have friends here, chefs that are friends, and, then I'll get a phone call. Oh, you don't like my restaurant? Thanks. So, no. Yeah. Anyway.
But we'll talk about your time in Houston when you're here.
Yeah, okay.
Because I have a couple questions about that.
All right.
But, there's that.
All right.
The book, Why I Cook. Why'd you write it?
Why did I write it?
Little known, I didn't realize this when we were sitting backstage. I asked him, I was like, well, I mean, you've written a book since. And he's like, no.
No, this is my fourth. I have owed this book to my publisher for 17 years. I haven't been working on this book for 17 years.
Eric, when I'm late with the wine article, don't worry, man. It's within 17 years, so.
Well, so at first this book started out as a large format coffee table book. I was seated next to the woman who edited the French Laundry cookbook at the French Laundry, there was a lunch, book party. And she said, hey, do you want to do one of these? I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I was doing a series called Tom's Tuesday Dinner. And the food was a dinner, it was a lengthy meal, like a 10, 12 course meal. And the food was what I call high touch food. It was not tweezer food, but close to it.
Yeah.
And so
32 hands on one plate.
Yeah. And so I was going to do that book, and I actually started working on it, and it was so complicated that I just scrapped it. I was like, I'm not doing this. And then I was going to do a book where I was going to teach my then 15-year-old how to cook, and not to be a professional chef, but just to learn how to cook. And he was dabbling in photography at the time, so he was going to shoot it. And then his girlfriend, he was away at boarding school. He came home for the summer. We started working on it. His girlfriend showed up. That was the end of that. His girlfriend was more interesting than I was. Go figure. Anyway, so and the reason I know it's 17 years is because he's 32 now. Yeah. And then I was going to do a butchering book, but there was a whole bunch of butchering books coming out. And then I was going to do a gardening book because I love to garden. And
this is over a thought process over 17 years.
This is over a period of time, yes.
Okay.
And so a gardening book, and I actually started working on it. But then I love to garden, and I grow a lot of food, and I cook all summer long out of the garden. But I'm not really a gardening expert. Like, I can move a lot of dirt around and stuff and grow stuff, but I'm not really an expert. So I was like, I don't want to do that.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you that that's probably the book I would buy.
All right, well.
I mean, I bought this one too, but like, the whole thing is like, I don't know anything about gardening.
Yeah, I don't either, but I know how to grow stuff. That's my problem.
But you do it, and so just your insight on like,
yeah.
hey,
I may still do that. I don't know.
you may not know how to garden. I don't either, but I'm going to tell you what I know. Like,
Yeah.
I would take that probably better than.
Yeah, and then Enid Garden came out with a book, so no, that was a bad joke.
Okay.
That was a terrible joke, by the way. That was a bad dad joke, wasn't it? It was really bad. Anyway, so then the pandemic hits. Well, my editor retired, so I was like, that's it, I'm done. I don't have to write this book.
I'm out.
I'm out. I called my agent. I said, let's buy this back. I really don't want to do it. And she called and said, they're not selling it back to you. And but there's a new editor and a new publisher, and why don't you meet with them? And this was right at the beginning of the pandemic, so we waited a little bit, and then they came in, and I met with them, and I liked them. And then the other thing that was happening was during the pandemic, you know, like so many chefs and restaurateurs, I was going through an existential crisis as to, you know, restaurants are closed. When are they gonna reopen? Do I want to reopen them? Am I just ready to retire? I didn't know. And I was doing a lot of these Zoom cooking classes for our clients. And
I know how that works.
And there was usually 20 minutes of cooking, 40 minutes of chit chat.
Yeah.
And these were great. I was doing, like, you know, sometimes 3 or 4 a week. And, you know, question would always come around, like, you know, when did you start cooking? Why do you cook? And at first I'd started, you know, giving these kind of pat answers. And then I really started to think about it. And, you know, during that time you have a lot of time to think. And it was also a time in my life when my wife and I were really going through some problems and started to see a counselor. And so I really started to think long and hard about who I am, who I was as a child, and what I'm like as an adult, and really trying to figure this piece out. And again, it's, you know, during the pandemic, I had a lot of long nights to think about this stuff. And I thought it was time to write a memoir. And so that's what I settled on, a memoir. And then once I decided to write a memoir, you're just getting a book now, I'm pretty honest about my life.
Very.
Brutally honest. And that was the only way I could do it. And so yeah, that's why now.
I'm gonna be honest. My therapist told me you need to speak into this, because I don't have a computer.
Right.
I'm just that kind of person.
Yeah.
And she said, you just need to speak into a microphone, lay it all out, and then publish that. And so, is that kind of how you went down that path? Or?
No.
You seem like you type a lot.
No, I don't type at all.
Me.
Lindsay. I don't type. I don't write. So in the book, I talk about having ADHD. Wasn't diagnosed back when I was in school. And all of my children, all 3, have been clinically diagnosed. They've all had psych evaluations. I see a lot of the same issues they have that I had. But I went from being a very good student until 4th grade. And 4th grade hit, and I was all of a sudden went from being a really smart kid, being the smart kid in the class, to being dumb. At least in my head, dumb, like something I couldn't figure stuff out anymore. And so my response was just to act up.
Well, it's that you're the class clown.
I did. I became the class clown because that was my coping mechanism. And then later on, it turned to self-medication and, you know, drugs. But the writing piece, I was answering the question. The writing piece, looking at the psych evaluations, if anybody's had them or had their children's had them, it's a 4-day test, and they can really drill down into learning difficulties that you have. And we found that there is one particular difficulty where you don't have the executive function to get thoughts out of your head and actually write. And that's the problem that I had. I really struggled to write. And so no, I don't write. The first 2 books my wife wrote. She's actually a very talented writer. 3rd book, she was like, I don't want any part of this. So her sister wrote it. and then this one, she swore up and down she would not write it. And she did come and made sure my voice was in the book.
I totally see everything about that, because I feel the same way almost. For me, it's reading the book. You can never really follow a recipe. Like, start to finish, reading all the way through it. I don't think I've ever done that.
Well, yeah, the context, little context for that. So when I started cooking at home when I was young. There was something about it that I just absolutely, I felt it was easy, it came easy, I loved doing it. And so part of the exploration Because this book is, I answer the question why I cook, but there's a couple different answers to it, not just one answer.
Yeah.
But the book is also about manhood and about the examples that I had growing up. My grandfather was always in my life. And I lived on 4 families on a lot. He lived in the back one, we lived in the front. And he was retired by the time we were, 8, 9, somewhere in there. And so he was always around, he always drove us around. My friends and I were going to a concert, he would drive us. And
He said he just would sit outside and wait for you.
he would sit outside and wait. We would go to the Passaic Theater in Passaic, New Jersey, the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey, and see shows there, and he would wait for us. But more importantly, I would go and fish with my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was about 7 when I started going with him.
That's when you caught the bug for that?
That's when I caught the bug, yeah. I have a bad fishing bug. If I could fish 100 days of the year, I would. I had 2 jobs when I would go fishing with him. The first job was when we got home, I had to clean all the fish. We would go crabbing and clamming, and we'd also catch some fish. He wasn't a great fisherman, but we'd catch some fish. But I was responsible for cleaning everything. So at a very young age, they put a knife in my hand. Not quite sure why the 7-year-old was allowed to fillet fish, but I was.
You learn it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
And then my second job, the ride was about an hour and a half. My second job was I had to keep him awake on the ride home. So here I was, 7 years old. I'm in the front seat. It's the 70s, no seatbelts.
Yeah.
Right? He was a chain smoker. We just kind of did it. And I would have to sit there and just watch him. And as soon as I saw him nodding out, I'd nudge him. And he'd always say the same thing. I'm not sleeping, I'm just resting my eyes. We always made it home. We always got home. But what happened after that, I think is one of the reasons I think why I cook.
Yeah.
Because these meals, because we caught so much crabs and clams, so these meals were not just immediate family. These were cousins and uncles and friends. It's summer meals, so you have 20 or 30 people sitting outside, on a long picnic table. And just, and we would make what we called crab gravy. We would cook crabs the way you normally cook crabs.
So blue crabs?
Blue crabs. Yeah, we have
Okay.
blue crabs in New Jersey.
Just wondering.
You know,
If you had the best crabs,
I know,
too.
I know you people down the Gulf think you have a license on crabs, but we got crabs. And I got a good friend of mine from Maryland, so we have this argument all the time. We get crabs.
Yeah,
And
but
so,
all the good Maryland crabs come from Texas.
well, yeah, but the Jersey crabs are from Jersey.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll let you have that.
Yeah,
one,
we have,
for
we have,
sure.
anyway, but we would cook them, steam them, and then take the shell off, clean out the gills, and then we'd break them in half and then put them in marinara sauce and let them simmer in marinara sauce for about 30, 40 minutes, and then we would eat that over linguine and then pick the crabs.
Huh?
And then we always had clams. That was usually just garlic, olive oil, parsley.
I didn't see the crab
No, those
recipe
that's not in there. I don't know why it's not in there. It should have been. Next book. No.
Yeah, I was going to say. 18
20
years from now.
We'll get a crab recipe. Yeah, but it was all these people. It was all this, food had the power to bring people around the table, and I think that's probably one of the reasons. But as a kid, I started cooking at a young age, and because of my ADHD, I struggled reading a recipe. And so if I saw something that said, bone out a shoulder of lamb, tie it up, sear it on all sides, remove it from the pan, add mirepoix, whatever the hell that was, right?
Yeah.
Add mirepoix, brown it up, add 2 cups of red wine, add 2 cups of, 3 cups, 4 cups of chicken stock, whatever.
Where'd you stop?
Add a bouquet garni, again,
Yeah.
whatever that was. Put it in the oven for 3 hours. Now, they simply could have said braise the lamb shoulder, right?
Yeah.
Because that's all we're doing. That's it. And so now, I don't know what happened. I was about 15 or so, and I had been cooking. Actually, I was a short order cook at the age of 13. Best job I ever had in my life. I worked at a swim club my parents belonged to. I wore shorts, sometimes a shirt, never shoes, an apron, and I would just, the short order cook. It was
Classic
great.
move,
And
right
I was getting paid $275 a week under the table as a 13-year-old. It was awesome. It was the best job I ever had. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're past the statute of limitations, so the IRS could you stay away.
I'm like, that's amazing.
It was great. And so, but I struggled reading recipes, and now I'm about 15, and my dad wasn't the kind of dad who would sit down and have these long conversations with you about the
No, you
food.
kind of got that in the book. It was
And my
like,
dad was a complicated guy. He was addicted to gambling, and
there wasn't a lot of conversation
he
on the car rides.
No, he had his own issues. No. I dreaded getting in a car. He would drive me to my swim practices on Saturday morning in the winter, and I would dread it because we would not say 2 words to each other. It was terrible.
The uncomfortable silence.
Yeah, it was bad. And it was back in the day where you couldn't put headphones on it. But one day, he brought these books home from work, and there was the New York Times cookbook, there was a few others, but I have no idea what Jacques Pepin's La Technique was doing in the county jail library. Now, my dad wasn't an inmate. He was a
No.
corrections officer. And so he brought this. So this showed me, number one, that he was paying attention.
Yeah.
But this book, for those that don't know it, this book was about Jock really teaching that cooking is about techniques and methods, not about recipes.
Yeah.
And then once I worked through the book and learned these techniques, then cooking became really fun and easy, and I never looked back. And then also during this time, I was a very good swimmer when I was 8 to 13. I swam till I was 17. I coached for a few years, but I didn't lose a race. And then when I started partying, when I was 13,
Changes then.
I changed. Yeah, I
it all changes.
stopped working hard, and all these kids that I beat were beating me. And I was competitive, and I was really pissed off. And I promised myself if I found that one thing that I was good at, I'd.
You found
push
it, though,
I
huh?
found it. Yeah, and I think maybe.
Yeah, I think you did. I mean, I would say so. I like that. We got that far. That's one question.
Yeah. just throw them out.
But like that first dish that you made, it says that like, you wrote about how you were at your aunt's salon, mom getting hair done.
Yeah, yeah,
And you made
yeah.
an eggplant. I don't even know how to say that.
Pirogue.
Pirogue?
Yeah, pirogue is like a flat-bottom boat. It's like a John boat, sort of.
Yeah.
But anyway. But yeah, that was.
Eggplant canoe, basically.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Okay.
So eggplant canoe. So it was a stuffed eggplant. It's a dish that you take eggplant, you roast it, scoop it out, add zucchini, onions, peppers, shrimp, and stuff. So, but this particular day, I remember this as if it were yesterday. I was most likely getting punished because I was with my mother getting her hair done. So I was clearly getting punished, and my cousin had a beauty salon, and there were a bunch of magazines, as there are in beauty salons.
Yeah.
And there was Cuisine magazine. I don't know if anybody remembers Cuisine
Absolutely.
magazine. On the cover was this older black woman. She was sitting on a porch, and this was the cover story was about Creole cooking.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at it and going and reading the story. I was like, I was like, oh, it's history buff, and I was like, this is really fascinating.
How old were you right there?
I was about 13, 14.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember looking through it, going, I think I could do this recipe. Now, the funny thing about it was an appetizer.
Yeah.
And so I like made dinner and put it on the table, and they're like, okay, what's next? It's like, that's it.
My
and
bad.
so my mom had to bail me out of that one, yeah. I didn't cook a lot at home doing dinners and stuff, but I was just always messing around in the kitchen.
My
That was
my
one of the
parents,
first things I remember cooking.
And I think it was 77, something like that. So I was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8, something like that. And they bought me the Walt Disney cookbook.
Oh, okay.
And so I would lay on the floor and look at this Walt Disney cookbook. And, they had a lot of hot dog pizza and, shit like that. But it's the only book that I've kept my entire life.
Huh, cool.
It's still sitting up at the house.
Yeah, I wish I had that magazine, but I can picture it still. But I didn't cook a lot at home, but I was working in restaurants from the age of, I started as a shorter cook at 13, and I started working in restaurants at like 14 or 15, and then right after high school, I started working in a seafood restaurant.
Yeah.
I worked around New Jersey. Now, growing up in New Jersey, I could actually see the Twin Towers out of my bedroom window, and New York we would go there as kids and go to concerts at the Garden, but in terms of like ever thinking of working there, like that was this odd thing. Like I was not going to do. I was going to work in New Jersey, so I'm working in New Jersey. But I always wanted to work in New York. But I always thought that you had to be ready for it. So I wanted to make sure I worked in a bunch of restaurants. I worked at a seafood restaurant for about a year and a half, and then I worked at a red sauce Italian place.
Were you breaking down fish in the seafood restaurant? Because you were doing that when
No,
you were 7.
everything was filleted. But it was a busy restaurant. We would do 1,000 covers on a Saturday
That's
night.
busy.
Yeah, and so everything was. I worked in a prep kitchen where we would just I'd peel 300 pounds of shrimp a day.
That
it was
sucks.
just,
I did it too.
Yeah. But I think the fourth restaurant that I worked in was a restaurant called 40 Main Street. We were actually doing like really like new American cuisine.
Yeah.
Back in this is 83, I think 82, and then got a couple guys I was working with. They had worked in New York, and they said, "No, you're ready." So I wanted to work at a restaurant called the Quilted Giraffe. It was a four-star New York Times restaurant, and I liked the food that they were doing, and I was too afraid to go to Lutece. But I turned in my resume. I didn't hear back, and so I ended up taking a job at Gotham when he was there for 2 days when I started. I actually went to Jams at Jonathan Waxman's restaurant.
When was this?
This is 82, 83, somewhere there.
Wow.
And so, but this woman interviewed me at Jonathan's restaurant, and her name was Helen Shardak, and she said, well, we don't have any openings, but go talk to this guy, Alfred Portale. I found out much later that Alfred and Helen were married. And so
Ew.
I go down, and I worked there for 2 days, and then Barry Wine was the owner and chef at Cool to Traffic, called me up, and I took that job, and I was there for about 4 months, and he gave me the sous chef's job. And at that point, I'm still planning on going to culinary school. But at that point, I decided, like, I don't need to go, and I didn't really want to go to school. I went to Catholic school for 14 years, and I didn't want to go back to school.
I get that. I mean, I went to culinary school. It was the only schooling I ever did okay in.
Yeah, and Cool to was great. It was an amazing experience. It was also great because the restaurant was open Monday to Friday, closed Saturday and Sunday, no lunches. It was a great job. Yeah, and Barry only wanted to work 5 days a week.
I feel like I could do that.
Barry had an interesting take. He was a lawyer before he opened a restaurant, and he only wanted to work 5 days a week. And he knew, because the restaurant was so busy, we did 120 covers every night, Monday or Friday, it didn't matter. And so
That was the max. That was
yeah,
what
that
it was.
it. That's all we did. But also back then, this is 1982, 83, somewhere 84. We had like $150 check average back then.
That's great.
Yeah, I think the rent was $4,000 a month. He made so much money.
Yeah.
But it was a great restaurant. And then I left that restaurant to go back to New Jersey because I knew my next step was a chef's job, and I wanted to work on figuring out what my style was and what I was going to end up doing. So I went back to New Jersey to do that, and then ended up going you to New York at a restaurant
So
called
did you go
Mono
back?
Ground.
You went back to 40 Main?
I went back to 40 Main. Yeah, the owner of the restaurant called me up. The chef left and called me up, and I ended up going back there.
Did you do a co-chef thing?
I did. I had a friend of mine. We worked together at 40 Main Street. He was from Virginia Beach originally, and he and I became like really good friends. And we were talking about doing a restaurant together. And so when Danny Canizio was the owner's name, when he called me, I said, "Well, I'll come on under one condition: Jerry comes with me." And we were there for about only 8 months, but Jerry and I were best friends. He moved back to Virginia. I ended up going down there and helping him out, opening a restaurant, and unfortunately he passed away just as I was finishing the book. Yeah, and he fought bone cancer for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And just as I was finishing the book, he never got to read it. I was so bummed out because he's in there, and then I ended up dedicating the book to him. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
You worked with TK, with Thomas Keller?
I did. I worked for Thomas Keller at a restaurant called Raquel. It was in New York, probably right around the same time, 80, maybe 5.
So this
I
is
was
like
working there.
12 years before The Laundry.
Oh, yeah.
Long
Way
before.
before Laundry, yeah.
Yeah.
He worked around New York a bunch, worked in France, and then same thing. I was working in France, and I came back home, and I was talking to Alfred Portale. It's like, I need a job. And he's like, well, go talk to Thomas Keller. And I said, I don't know who that is. And they worked together. There was that famous, the Polo restaurant, where Daniel Boulud, Thomas Keller, Alfred Portale, Frank Crispo, Daniel Boulud, David Boulay, they all worked there at the same time. And these were all
a hell of a
brilliant
lineup.
chefs. Yeah. And so I ended up going and working with him, and it was a great experience. We were doing just great food. But it was a funny restaurant because Serge Raoul, from Raoul's restaurant in New York, he was the his partner. And Serge wanted a club, like this fun bar on one side, and Keller was doing a very serious restaurant on the other, and it's never worked.
It doesn't really work now either.
And so he closed and ended up going to California. Yeah.
Where'd you go after that?
Him? Or me? Oh, so after
not
that,
talking to him, I'm talking to you.
I went down to Virginia to help my friend Jerry open the restaurant, and then I came back. And so when I was bouncing around New Jersey, there was a restaurant called the Tarragon Tree, owned by a guy named Dennis Foy. And it was, a very good restaurant in New Jersey. And I actually interviewed for 10 seconds with Dennis. My friend Jerry was working there, so I was going to interview. And Dennis lived upstairs from the restaurant, and he told me to get there at 8 o'clock. I got there at 8, he came down at 12. I waited the 4 hours. And he picked up my resume and said, I have no time for you, and walked out. I was like, all right, whatever. So I'm at my friend Jerry's house, and this guy Dennis comes down. And he tells, he went down to visit Jerry. He didn't know I was there, and he didn't remember me at all. So we started chatting, and he was a good guy, fun guy, but he said he was opening this restaurant in Manhattan. Soon after that, I was back up in New York. D'Artagnan, Ariane Dagan. It was her daughter's christening, so I was up there for that, and a bunch of us were sitting around, and George Faison, who was Ariane's partner, pointed, Dennis there, and pointed to me and said, "This is the guy you should get to run your kitchen." I had planned on going back to France to work. I had 2 stages lined up, and that was my last bit before I was going to take a chef's job. And my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was like stage 4 lung cancer, so I canceled my trip to France and I stayed home. And I ended up taking this job. And I was there for about a month, and I didn't really love it, and I was there for about a month when my father passed away. So I stayed home with my mother for about a month. I ended up going back to work, and then I only worked for about another month or so, and ended up going to France. And then the owner of that restaurant, the actual money behind it, called me up and said, come back home. And this was a restaurant called Mondrian, and that was my first chef's job in New York. I was 26 at the time.
How'd you feel about that? Were you like, I'm ready?
I'll tell you why I was ready. So there was something that happened, and this is why I quit.
Because, you started cooking when you were like, I don't know,
I was
4.
ready. So, but I actually quit, and this is why I quit. And this was very frustrating. So there was a couple dishes that I had on the menu. It was fine. They were my dishes. And I didn't really love the food that we were doing there, and I didn't love his managerial style. He was an ex-military guy, ran the kitchen like that, and it didn't work with me. And right before I left, I was working on a dish. It was a dish I called fried oyster stew. And so it was made with salsify and aromatic vegetables, but then you pureed the whole thing, pureed oysters into it, and then there were oysters that we would shred like really, really fine potato, and then put the oyster in the potato and wrap it up and then fry it.
Yeah.
And so I call it fried oyster stew. And so the New York Magazine.
So you potato crusted oyster.
Yeah, oyster, yeah. And it is a pain in the ass, but that's what we were doing.
Yes.
That's what we were doing. And so anyway, I do this dish, and I get a phone call from New York Magazine, and Dennis did, and said they want to come in and they want to, every week they featured a dish. And so I was like, okay, and I worked on the recipe. They came in and shot the photos. I opened the magazine on Monday morning, Dennis Foy's fried oyster stew. It's like, I'm done. It's like, because I was ready to be a chef then. I'm like, I'm not going to start creating dishes that are going to get And so I left and I went back to France. I went to work for Michel Bras. I was there for about 3 months when I got called back. And but it was great. We were doing, I met at the time when I was working in France the first time in Gascony, I met a young cook named Kerry Heffernan, and he's my best friend to this day. And he was the first person I called and said, I need a sous chef. He was working at Boulet, so he came over. And we put together a great team. We got 3 stars at the age of 26, and
That's awesome.
It was good stuff. Yeah, it was, times were good, but wasn't a good business deal, and the restaurant eventually failed. Yeah. Rent.
Yeah.
Rent. So put it into perspective. Next restaurant I opened is Gramercy Tavern. Gramercy Tavern has 120 seats in the dining room, 60 seats in the bar, a 30-seat private dining room. We were paying $9,000 a month in rent. Mondrian had a 80-seat dining room, a 30-seat private dining room. We were paying $35,000 a month in rent. Yeah, so a bunch of Morgan Stanley bankers owned it.
That mad don't work, man.
No, and a bunch of Morgan Stanley bankers owned it. And what they did is they just kept putting money into it. They didn't want to see it fail. So every month I'd go and we'd do the P&L, and every month we lost another $40,000. Write a check. Okay, and after about 2 years of this.
Yeah, it's not going to work forever.
Well, after about 2 years of this, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, guys, yes, critically we're successful, and I'm winning awards and stuff, but this is a failed business. You got it.
Best new chef there?
Yeah. 91, yeah. And I was like, we can't do this anymore. So I got them to close it, and then the main investor, a guy named Bob Scott, who is still my partner to this day, I talked to him and said, let's look downtown. Everything was moving downtown then. But I met Danny Meyer at Food and Wine Aspen in 91 when I won Best New Chef. His chef at Union Square Cafe, Michael Romano, won the same year. So I met him there, and then he kept coming into the restaurant. And then the following year, I was at a luncheon with him, and I said, listen, when I get back to New York, I want to call you. Called him up when I got back home, and I said, listen, I'm closing the restaurant, and I think you like what I do. You come in a lot, and I like what you do. Why don't we open a restaurant together? And his response was, I'll never open another restaurant again.
Yeah, that didn't hold true.
It didn't last too long. And,
Shake Shack?
But the funny story, he told me that we had a mutual friend. It was a wine importer named Robert Chatterton. And he ran into Robert and said, hey, Tom Colicchio is closing, and he wants to do a restaurant with me. What do you think? And his response was, if Sandy Koufax called and said he wants to pitch for your team, you'd probably say yes. So we actually took a trip together.
I mean, that's pretty high praise.
It was good, yeah, it was good stuff. So we took a trip together. We spent 10 days in Italy, and we came off the plane with an idea of Gramercy Tavern. That was 92. Yeah. And the restaurant opened in 94.
92, you opened at 94.
Yeah.
I mean, how long were you Gramercy?
Gramercy, I was there for about 10 years.
That's a long run.
It was
Because you were a partner in this restaurant.
Oh, so my partner, Bob Scott, and I, we owned 40% of the restaurant. We were going to do 50-50, and in the last second, Danny came back and said he needed an additional 10% for some family members or something. And so yeah, what I did is Bob, I had no money to invest in a restaurant, but Bob, what he did was he guaranteed a loan. So he went to the bank, borrowed the money, but it was my loan, and I had to pay it back. And so I actually invested in the restaurant, yeah.
That'd feel pretty good.
It felt great, yeah. It felt really good. Yeah.
I mean, because it's like,
I had skin in the game, and
Yeah.
it was a lot. At the time, especially, it was a lot of money that I was on the hook for, and
which is terrifying.
It was, and it took about 5 years to pay it back, but we did pay it back, and yeah, it was great. It was a long run, and then eventually Danny and I couldn't work together anymore. He was starting his hospitality group, and I was kind of in it, but not really, and I wanted to do other restaurants on my own, and we got to the point where he came to me one day and said, only one of us should own this restaurant. And I said, well, I'm not selling, and he couldn't force me to sell it. And so we worked out a deal where I was buying it from him, and I thought about it over. The deal was done, and I had investors lined up to buy him out, and I thought about it over a weekend, came with a price that I wanted, and he paid for it. So, and my reasoning behind it was...
So you were going to buy him out, and then in turn, he turned around and bought you out.
Well, I threw a number out to him.
Okay.
And he agreed. But part of the reason I decided to sell was there was a moment in time where, and these names may not mean a lot to anybody, but at the time they were really important. Claudia Fleming was the pastry chef.
Yeah.
Right? A guy named Nick Matone was our general manager. Paul Greco, who went on to do Hearth,
Yep.
he was our service director. Marco Canora, James Tracy, Akhtar Nawab, Jonathan Benno, they were line cooks.
I mean, that's
They
all.
weren't even
yeah.
sous chefs. They were these are all really great New York chefs now, and I could do anything there. I mean, we would do our prefix menu. It was about 10 appetizers, 10 entrees. We would do a 7-course tasting menu, and then a 7-course specialty menu. It could be tomatoes in the summer, truffles in the winter, mushrooms. And then I would do another menu that was a 12-course menu that I never wrote down. The chefs had no idea what it was. It was in my head. And I would go to the green market and shop for some stuff. And if somebody ordered it, we'd just start cooking. And I was like, that was the heyday. There was no way I can get back to that. And Kraft was already open. That's the other thing. Most people think that I left Gramercy to open Kraft.
You had already opened Kraft.
Kraft was already open, yeah.
When did you do that?
So thank you. So
They like the Kraft.
well, he and I worked it out. I helped him open up 11 Madison and Tabla, and then I came to, it was time for me to do my restaurant, and it was right around the corner, and we worked it out. It was a lot of back and forth to work it out.
That's hard.
But we worked it out, and so Kraft was open for 2 years before I left Gramercy. Yeah, most people think that I left one to open the other.
Yeah.
But no, in fact, opening night at Kraft, I was on the pass at Gramercy.
I read that.
Yeah. I just wanted to prove to my partner that I wasn't just bailing. I was going to be there. So, we started. Service started, and I wasn't expediting. Marco was the chef de cuisine, so he was expediting. Things were fine, and the restaurant was around the corner. So I literally ran around the corner and jumped on the pass. Yeah. Also that, and I was terrified of the opening Kraft, so I just, I hightailed it back to Gramercy. It was easier.
Go back to my safety net.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in my safe place.
I understand that too.
Yeah.
You got when you got the 4 walls that you're used to, and then you go into another place.
Yeah.
It's not as. It takes time to be that place to be as comfortable.
Right. But it was a special restaurant. I mean, Gramercy, besides the restaurant itself being special, my son was born when we were building it. I met my wife there. So yeah, it holds a lot of meaning. I mean, there are times I have regrets of selling it. Also, I had done the first season of Top Chef when I was still there. It was that long ago.
You're running a restaurant. You got another one on the way. Was it on the way?
Kraft was open. Vegas was
Kraft was
open.
open.
Vegas
What
was open. Vegas was already open.
When did you open Vegas?
Vegas opened a year after Kraft opened.
So you opened Kraft. You still had Gramercy. You opened Kraft, and then opened Kraft Vegas.
Yeah, Kraft Steak in Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because right when I opened, when I was still at Gramercy, I was approached by the president of the MGM, and wanted to do Gramercy there, and Danny wouldn't do it, so I couldn't do that. And so when Kraft opened up, he called me up and said, "Well, can you do Kraft there?" And I was like,
yes, I can.
"Sure." And he said, "Well, you can do anything you want, but it has to be a steakhouse." So I was like, "All right, we'll call it Kraft Steak." And
Easy.
yeah, it's easy. And so yeah, that was open. So TV, my first experience. I don't know if I have this in the book. My first experience with TV was so god awful.
Mine too.
It was 1991. It was after I won Best New Chef. I got home, and I got a call from the Regis and Kathy Lee show. Yeah, it was that long ago. Regis and Kathy Lee. And so it was Friday. And they said, "Well, can you bring your award?" And it was a big bottle of champagne. It was like, can you bring like a dish that you're going to do? I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I show up with a little cooler, and I was doing this braised red snapper. It was braised, so you sear it on the skin side, you braise it in this lemon rosemary vinaigrette, and it roasted peppers in it, and then there's this eggplant caviar that's sandwiched between 3 slices of fried eggplant. And so I had it all worked out.
Okay.
Had the swap outs all ready to go. And so the first thing, so I get there. I go through the segment, and she's like, "Great, you're going to be fine." So I'm leaving. And this is the afternoon, like 3 o'clock, and there's these 2 stagehands. And I said, "What time should I come here on Monday?" I said, "I get here at 8 o'clock." So I stroll in at 8 o'clock. The show's on at 10. I stroll in at 8 o'clock, and the producer just starts yelling at me. "Where were you? I called you." She called every Colicchio in the damn phone book. And she's like, "You should have been here at 6 o'clock for rehearsal." And I'm like, "But the guys," and these guys are laughing their asses off now.
Oh, boy.
And so I'm setting up on my table. Back then, I'm by myself.
No help.
There's this table on wheels with a burner on it, whatever.
Yeah.
There's an oven that kind of works behind me. But everything was done. And I'm setting up, and every 5 minutes she'll come over and say, "I should pull you, you're going to screw this up." You could literally, I have a VHS tape still of this, and you could still see my finger, I'm pointing, and I'm shaking. And so the segment starts, Regis comes over, and the first thing I do is I slice an eggplant in half, score it, and put it in the oven. Now, the eggplant caviar was already done, or the roasted one, but he's there messing around with the dials, trying to get the oven on. And I'm like, "It's okay, come over here." And he goes, "No, but the oven." I'm like, "No, come over here." And he comes over, and he goes, "That's what happens when you miss rehearsal." And I'm like, I can't believe this guy just threw me under the bus on TV. So we go through the segment, and
that would have been worth a leg sweep.
I nail it. Yeah, exactly. I nail it. It's done on time. Producer comes over to me. She goes, "That was great." Regis goes over now, and she goes, "Oh, that was great. That was amazing." I was like, "Why did he do that? Why did he throw me under the bus?" And she goes, "No, he missed rehearsal." So she said to me, I remember she said, "That was great. Anytime you want to come back on, let me know." And I looked at her, I said, "I will never do TV again." Years later, this is a very funny story. It's not in the book. Years later, I'm at Martha Stewart's house in Connecticut doing her holiday special.
Yeah.
And
As one does.
As one does, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm doing like braised short ribs or something, and somebody asked a question. They said, "No, when's the first time you did TV?" And I told them the story. Now, I am terrible at remembering names. Terrible. I'll never forget this woman. Never forget her name. And I told a story, and they said, "Do you know the producer's name?" I said, "Yeah, it was Barbara Fate." And they were like, all just like, you could see it. They were like, "She's one of our producers." You want to say hi to her? I was like, "Absolutely not. I do not want to see her." So I swore I would never do TV. So when I got a phone call one day out of the blue from a producer in California, her name was Shauna Minoprio. So yeah, when she's produced, I remember their names. And she said, "We're doing this show, and we think you'd be great on it." And I was like, "Absolutely not. I do not want to do a TV show." Everybody in my family thought I was crazy. I shouldn't do the show. My wife said I shouldn't do it. My cousin, who was my attorney, no way. My older brother, who really thinks he's the one who should be on TV, not me, I shouldn't do this. And so I told him no. And they said, "Well, can we get someone just to record you?" So they show up with this little camcorder and ask me a bunch of questions. I answer the questions. 2 days later, I got a call saying, "Can you come to LA for a screen test?" Like, no, I don't want to do the show.
We're going down this path. I've already said no 50 times.
And so I said, but I'm still in the game, kind of.
Yeah, you
and I said, listen,
you got to stick a couple toes
there was a
in it.
documentary done on the opening of Kraft, and it was for Nightline, And then after 9/11, they scrapped it, and it ended up airing on PBS. And it was supposed to be a how-to. It was like a whole series of how-to. And this was how to open a restaurant. But then nothing else got shot, so it was a standalone piece. So I sent that to her. And a couple days later, I got a call back, and she said, we want to make you an offer.
Oh, boy.
And I was like, oh, God. So then I started talking. I said, well, tell me about the show. And they produced Project Runway and Project Greenlight. And my wife's a filmmaker, so we knew Project Greenlight. And, but they sent a bunch of tapes. And it was right around the holidays, because I remember my wife and I, we watched them all. We just binged them before binging was possible. We binged them all.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, our bed was kind of, like, destroyed with, empty Chinese, takeout containers and stuff like that. We just stayed up and watched this thing. And it was so...
That was really hard to binge back then.
Yeah, it was. We had
Did you got to get up and click, and then you got to push the button?
I know.
That's a pain in the ass.
It was. Maybe I should do this. And this was my reasoning. I would go to, a food festival.
Yeah.
And book signing came, and I'm sitting next to, Bobby Fillet, and he's signing 300 books, and I'm signing 20. And I don't think it was because he had a better book. And it's like, it had to be this TV thing. So I was like, fine, let's do TV. The only thing I asked them, I said, this is just, I'm not going to do a show where somebody's making decisions. Like, the judges have to make decisions. And they said, absolutely, no problem.
You didn't want somebody from the background telling you that person should do it.
Well, I had heard that in some other shows that, they kind of reverse engineer it. They know who's winning ahead of time, and they back it up. And it's like, I'm not interested in doing that. My worry, and what I really wanted, was I wanted to do something that our industry would look at and say, this is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to, just go do TV.
Yeah.
And so, and they were fine with that. And so
do you think that was the original vision that they had, though?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Because you're telling them what you want to do, and they're just like,
Yeah, I don't know. The first season was rough. If you ever look back on that season 1, boy, I thought for sure, like, we're not going to do a season 2. I mean, we shot it in the S&M Club on Halloween. It was just horrible.
Lindsay, we're going to have to binge that.
Yeah. And we were staying in this crummy hotel. My wife called, and she said, how's it going? I said, it's all right. We're staying in this really crappy hotel. And she said, you're just a baby. It's probably fine. So she was, that Halloween night where we shot in the S&M Club, she actually flew in. And I had a break between eating food and judging. We had a couple hours, so I went back to the hotel. I opened the door, and she is in her coat still. Her bags are over here, and she's sitting on the end of the bed. And she's like, we are not staying here. That was the same thing Katie Lee, who was married to Billy Joel at the time. I run into her the first day of shooting. I said, so what do you think of the hotel? And her response was, Billy's coming here tomorrow, and I don't think he'll stay here. She stayed at the Four Seasons.
Yeah. Time to check out. You had 5 Beard Awards at that point?
Something like that.
Yeah. Who the hell's got 5 Beard Awards?
Like,
You. 8? Jesus. 5 then, 8 now. 8.
Yeah, I don't know how many I had. I have no idea. But I was busy in the restaurant too. But they also said it was only about 5 weeks or 6 weeks.
Hold on. 8 Beard Awards now?
I think so.
You're fucking Michael Phelps of food.
Yeah. All it means I'm doing a long time. That's all it means.
Yeah. There's a lot of people doing it a long time. Not like that, but yeah. Good job. Congrats.
But thanks. Second season came, third season. By the third season, it started to feel right. And again, my worry was that the industry was just going to laugh at this thing. And by the third season, when chefs that I really admire started calling, saying, "Hey, can I guest judge?" It's like, all right, we're good. But also, it took a lot of back and forth with the producers and with Bravo, because the first season they had some home cooks on, and there's no way a home cook can actually compete against a chef that's been working for 10 years, an executive chef. You just can't, because when we say you have an hour to cook, you have an hour to cook. And we're eating right after that hour, and you're by yourself. And then the other little thing is you're not allowed phones, magazines, TV, music, absolutely nothing. And it's hard to do. And so for someone who's not a professional chef, it's impossible. I think it was the third or fourth season where they were like, well, we have a student. The CIA said it's the best student they've ever had. First episode, gone. What's interesting, I think it was our 5th season or our 6th season where we won the Emmy. And so when you submit to the Emmys, you submit one episode. And they submitted the most foodie episode we had ever done. And they were fighting because they thought they were doing a reality show, and we were saying, no, this is a cooking show. And there's some reality to it, but it's really a cooking show. And it was an episode where, this was the season in Vegas with the Voltaggio brothers and Kevin Gillespie. And this was one episode that we were in a French restaurant, at like Robichon's restaurant, all these French chefs, most of them only speaking French. And it was the foodiest episode we've ever done, but the food was great. And you can see that, Jean Robichon was like buying into the show. He was like, this is real.
But at that point, you're kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I love doing that. Like,
What's up, Joe?
It's best, like, the people in the States know, we shoot in Europe, like, a lot of the chefs are European, and they think it's like fun and games. And it's like, as soon as they get the food, they're like, oh, wow, these chefs can cook. Actually, we had this one guy, we were shooting, I can't say where, in our finale, we had this one guy, and he was like, are they real chefs? And as soon as the first course came out, I looked at him and I said, what do you think? Yeah, they're real.
Yeah.
Listen, it's been a great ride. I still love doing the show.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah,
You look forward to it, yeah?
No, I do. It takes 2 days to shoot an episode. There's quick fire one day, and then usually after the quick fire, the elimination challenge is delivered to the chefs. Then they shop, they plan, they shop, and then the following day is cook. Or they're cooking overnight, and then we're eating, and that's it. So it's 2 days to shoot an episode. There are minimum 6 cameras shooting 14 hours a day. You see 48 minutes of that per episode. So there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of questioning the chefs, a lot of digging into the dishes, figuring out why they're doing it, and a lot of mentoring in a way.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff is kind of, if you're editing a show, it's kind of boring. Not that it's boring, but it's just not telling a story. And again, you only have 48 minutes per episode. So a lot of that you don't see, and that's to me, the best part. And so I get to mentor a lot of young chefs, and I love the people I work with, not just Gail and now Kristen, but the crew they're just fabulous.
And you've had, the same crews there all the time.
For the most part, it's the
right?
same. So the cameramen, the sound guys, and a bunch of us play instruments and get together, after if we're not shooting, play and hang out. And so it's like going to summer camp. It's like you go to summer camp, you have your summer camp friends. I'm with them for 6 weeks, and I don't see them until next year.
And I think that's also, like, you guys got to realize, like, 22 seasons, and you're gone for 6 weeks.
About 6 weeks, yeah.
Away from your family, away from everything. You're kind of back and forth a little bit.
I do fly back and forth depending on where we are.
Yeah.
Like when shooting in Toronto, I was back frequently because it's an hour flight. Here, also, in the beginning of I do the quick fire, the first quick fire, and then I don't do them usually after that until last season, then we started doing them in the middle. So I'm on one day off too. So if the judges table wraps at a decent hour and I can get on a flight, I go home and I'll be back on the set for 2 days. So I'll go back and forth. Now, when I was here pretty much.
You were here a lot.
Yeah, it was hard to get back and forth when I was here.
Yeah.
And fishing was pretty good here, so I hung around.
It is pretty good here. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Is there a favorite season that you've had? Like, I guess by that I mean, like, I don't mean by like the city.
Yeah.
That's another question, but like.
Not so much a favorite. So my favorite finale, my favorite meal, because I don't remember a lot of it, to tell you the truth. But
it's a lot.
Melissa King's finale meal was spectacular.
Yeah.
It really was. Yeah. I mean, we had Dario Cecchini, the butcher, legendary butcher, crying at the table. He was literally in tears. It was really good. Brian Voltaggio put together a great meal as well, but I mean, Melissa was just stunning. No, I mean, the Vegas season, because it was such there was so much talent there, it was good. But this past season that we just shot, I think is my favorite.
Really?
Yeah. It's,
Toronto. Who'd have thunk it?
No, well, Toronto, it had very little to do with Toronto.
Kidding, yeah.
No, it's just, I thought the season before, the talent was a little light.
What is that?
Danny, who won, was good, but I thought the talent overall was a little on the light side. And I kind of had a long conversation with the producer saying, we got to get, when we cast the show, we cast equally for men and women, we cast for diversity, we cast to try to make sure chefs are from all different states and stuff, not just in one place. And so, and sometimes I get the feeling that, like, when Buddha was on his season, he kind of ran away with it. I mean, he really did.
That was here, right?
Yeah, I think it was here.
Yeah.
And Paul Keyes, his season in Dallas, he kind of ran away with it too. And I think sometimes they're afraid of, like, they see a really good resume and they bypass. They don't want someone to run away with it. And so this season, I was like, well, then just get, like,
Take all the resumes that are good.
Yeah, get really good resumes. Yeah, come on, push it. And it was good. Even like the chefs that were 4th and 5th off were really good. And so this was a fantastic season. Food was, good. Like I can't give too much away, but there was one dish that was so spectacular. And the crazy thing is that there's a lot of things that we see that you wouldn't see outside of Top Chef just because of the parameters that we give them. So I really can't get into it, but if you watch this season, I think we start in March, there was one dish that was just just incredible. And the only thing I'll tell you, just remember pickles, okay? Just remember that episode, the pickle challenge, and it was shocking how good this was. So yeah, it was really good season. Yeah.
After 22 seasons, you know what? Doesn't get lame.
It doesn't. No, it's fun. It's fun. I love doing it. Yeah.
But is there a favorite city you had?
I think our finale in Singapore was great, just because I'd never been. And Singapore, for those that haven't been there, they treat food like a sport there. I mean, I remember I was in Australia and I flew into Singapore and I ran into someone, going to the hotel and I was starving and I ran into some of the crew. And I said, I'm really hungry, where should I go? It was like 10 in the morning. They said, there's a food hall. And this was before food halls were big here.
Yeah.
They said, there's like a mall, and go downstairs in the basement. I said, really? Unreal. Food there is incredible. And then one of my favorite things in the world is chili crab.
Okay,
Those big
yeah.
and they're all over Singapore.
Yeah, that's where they're at.
Singapore's a fun place. But
I'd like to do that.
But the fun thing about going into a town and a city and shooting the show is that we're there for 6 weeks, so you get to actually spend some time there. You're not there as a tourist. You're living there, and it's you get to see a little more of the town.
And that's where you and I kind of started to really meet.
Yeah, we hung out a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, because you guys filmed here in 21, and so there was we still had to be very careful about things. You guys couldn't go inside restaurants.
Yeah.
And so there'd be meals in the parking lot.
Yeah, we had to eat outside.
Yeah.
Although the year before we couldn't go to restaurants, period.
Yeah.
We were in Portland, but at least we got to go out, but we could only eat outside. But then you were generous to let us eat a couple meals at your house, so that was fun.
Yeah, no, and because everybody stayed at a hotel. You rented a house.
I rented a house, yeah.
And Gail rented a house down the street from ours. And so you guys would just come hang out on the back patio after, Gail would be sitting there and like, oh, Tom's coming over, he's done. Cool with that? I'm like, yep. And then all of a sudden you'd walk in and Wiley Dufresne would walk in behind you. And I'm like,
it's fun stuff.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it was good.
I never knew who was coming over.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
I actually really enjoyed my time here. And Houston's not, there's not a lot, as a tourist, not a lot of tourism here. But it's a real city, And so it was great to see because outside of maybe fishing here, I don't know if I would spend that, I wouldn't spend 6 weeks, but it was fun.
No, I mean, there's a lot of museums.
No, I'm saying, but as a tourist, you spend 5 days. So
Yeah.
if I came here with my kids as a tourist, you'd spend 5 days and do museums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't, spend time here.
No, you wouldn't get to see the actual
Yeah.
part of the city
Yeah.
that you need to.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. I got a bunch of them actually, so it's kind of this works. Is there a technique that when someone does, you judge more critically than others, and you just look at all and oh shit, here we go?
No. What I try to do, because listen, we all carry our baggage around with us, and there's things that we like and things that we don't like, and you kind of have to put that away. And so what I try to do is take the most objective pieces first, and that is something cooked correctly, is something seasoned correctly. And there's not a whole lot of subjectivity there. And a lot of the times I'll ask a chef if they cook a piece of meat, how did you want to cook this? If they say medium and it's medium, great. If they say they wanted to cook it medium rare and it's medium, and they screw it up.
Right.
So you'll ask that question, but also, when you braise something, right? If you braise something and you're in a rush and whatever you're braising isn't cooled down in the liquid you're cooking it in, it dries out. If you take it out of the liquid when it's cooked, put it off to the side, and then you have to reduce the sauce to make the sauce, that's going to dry out.
And not very good.
And it's not very good. And so that...
most people don't realize that you can really dry the shit out.
You can, even if braised. And so you see it right away, and you know it, and you say, you rush through this. And seasoning, I think it's pretty straightforward. Now, after that, then you look at the challenge. And this is something we're being a little more critical in recent seasons because a lot of times we give a challenge and you get a sense that the chef just realizes if they make a good dish, they're going to be safe, right? And so you got to look at the challenge and make sure they're actually paying attention to it. And then you look at other things like composition and balance. And so when I say composition, if you put a piece of fish on the plate and the piece of fish is 6 ounces, and the sauce is, a demi-tasse spoon.
Yeah.
And the garnish, and that's not balanced. You want to finish everything together. You want to make the perfect bite. You want to eat around the dish. So you look at that, and then you look at balance. You look at balance of flavors, and then you also have to be careful that you don't get suckered into spice, sugar, acid, and some herbaceous notes, because that's easy. That's too easy. Right, and so you got to make.
How I cook. So,
well,
yeah.
no. What I'm saying, it's easy to fall in love with that because it's those are flavor profiles that you really want.
Yep.
And so if you're looking at someone, if someone does, a blanquette de veau, right? They're very basic, French, kind of stew, white stew made with a roux, like that is, and if it's perfect, it's still really hard to judge that against someone who's doing something with chilies and
acid.
Acid and stuff. So you got to look at what they're doing and trying to do, and did they accomplish that? And that's really it. And usually you can get through most of it, just the first two. Is it cooked correctly? Is it seasoned correctly? And then you go from there. And if we say something is under-seasoned, it doesn't mean it's bland. It means it's slightly under-seasoned.
Yeah.
And I'm talking in degrees. If it's bland, we'll say it's bland. So the judging for me, it's never changed, and like I take all personal preferences out of it. I hate okra. If somebody cooks okra, I'm not like, oh, you're off the show because you made okra. No, I'm going to eat it and I'm going to judge it for what it is. I'm going to eat it still.
I'm asking all these questions because I'm trying to get on the show at some point. I want to.
You're there next season. You're there, man. Anytime. You were on.
No, I want to be a contestant one day.
You want to be a contestant? You may want to rethink that.
You know what? I thought about it, and then I came out there and judged a show with you, and I was like, hell no.
People ask me, how would you do it? At this age, no way.
No.
It's hard, man. It's hard. These chefs are on their feet 14 hours a day. They're getting judged. Everything they do is getting scrutinized, and it's hard, man.
That's a stress level,
usually, halfway through the season, for those that make it halfway, they start saying, like, we're tired. You see it. They're tired. They're exhausted. There's chefs who are used to working long hours and standing on their feet in hot kitchens. They're beat. It's mentally, it also.
Well, where's down? 6 weeks, right?
Well, they're there a little longer.
Yeah.
And also the days. So quick fire one day, elimination next day, and then they have interviews the third day. Now it used to be quick fire, elimination, quick fire, elimination, quick fire. There were some earlier seasons we just ran right through it.
Even like the 3 days, right? The quick fire, the challenge, the interview, like, even if you do great, you are going to internally, because you're going to sit there, you're going to talk about it with the other contestants, or I don't know if they talk or not.
They talk to each other, yeah.
Well, then that's all you
freaked
do.
out.
That's literally all you talk about.
Yeah, they're constantly freaked out. They're also, they never know what's coming. They think there's always going to be a curveball thrown at them. They're always freaked out. Yeah, it's rough. It really is. I mean, and that's the part that most people who watch the show don't see. How.
Yeah, no, I'm
grueling
really
it is.
reconsidering my thought process
Yeah.
here on trying to get on the show. I did one cooking show once, one like challenge thing.
What was that?
I did, a knife fight.
Knife fight with Ilan Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. How was that?
I was terrible. I went up against Brooke Williams. And they asked my wife, is he always this angry? And I was like, I'm not angry. I have an hour. Every time, and I don't know how these contestants do it, because like every time I turned around, there was somebody with a camera asking me a question. And I was like, well, ask the dude that just asked me the same damn question. Get out my way. Yeah. Like, well, we want to see a different reaction. I was like, it's going to be the same. Get out the damn way.
Yeah. That's the producer. That's what they do.
Yeah. And so, I realized at that point, that wasn't for me.
Yeah, I would. I mean, listen, when I was 26, 27, I think I would have done okay, but no way.
I also got like, well, we got a cowboy hat and a lasso, and I was like,
no.
Man, that's the wrong Texan.
You know what they did? So with the season, Dallas season, they wanted me in the photos that we do for the press. They wanted me to put a sheriff's badge on. I was like, "There's no way I'm doing that." I was like, "No, I'm not doing it." They airbrushed it in.
They did?
They airbrushed it in. I was so pissed off. And the woman who did it still works for Bravo. Every time I see her, I'm like, "How's that star working for you?"
Oh boy.
Yeah.
What are you airbrushing next?
Yeah. Exactly.
Is there, I mean, I guess you said there was the pickle dish or whatever, the pickle competition that you didn't really see coming. Out of all the things in the seasons, like there's a couple of dishes that just surprise you the most.
Yes, over the years, I don't remember them. Over the years, there's every season there's a couple dishes that you eat and go, wow, this is incredible. There's just, again, a lot of time it's because of the challenge that they would do this dish that you'll see when you watch it. There was no way anybody would make this dish on their own without them being forced into this challenge, and it was just extraordinary. But every now and then there's, a couple times a season you'll get something. In fact, that same pickle challenge, there was a dish before that we were just like blown away, just absolutely blown away. And then this other one comes along. Yeah, it often frequently happens. Yeah.
And then at this point, all these young chefs are talented enough that you don't get surprised with like, wow, that was just terrible. Every once in a while, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
It's just fear, though. It's got to be.
It happens a lot. Certain chefs will do better on the show.
Yeah, not me. I would do bad.
Well, like for instance, Alfred Portales, great American chef, just brilliant. And I know him really well. When he does a dish, he draws it out. After he draws it out, he works on it and works on it. And before it hits a menu, he's done a dish 10, 12 times and just works on it. Now, on Top Chef,
I've never done that in my life.
I don't work like that either.
Ever.
But on Top Chef, you're shooting from the hip. And once I think you have an idea, you have to commit to it. Because again, if we say you have an hour to cook, you have an hour to cook. You have to commit. And sometimes it's hard to do that. And every now and then also, there's little things where the kitchen, the range, the cooktop is not near your station. So, I mean, that would freak me out if I couldn't keep my eye on what was happening in the cooktop. And so, yeah, you get a lot of bad dishes. But I think the challenge, and there's a couple ways to play it, right? It's either you play not to lose, because you don't have to be better than 10 chefs every time. You just need to be better than one, right?
Yeah.
And so you can play just to
At
make sure.
some point, you got to be better than
At some
somebody.
At some point, you do.
To...
But you can get halfway through and just like make sure you're not screwing up, and then turn it on. Yeah. But we get some really bad dishes. There's only two things I spit out. So the first time,
It's like, you say that, I got to know.
the first time they didn't catch me. It was a quick fire, and I remember this. It was the dish was warm. It was lychee and clam and like papaya or something, and it was just disgusting. And I literally just like
No dice.
It was like the gag reflex immediately. As soon as I put it in my mouth, it was like, but I did it quickly, and no one caught me. Then we were shooting in Las Vegas in the desert. The guy made this cod ceviche that it was just funky. It was bad. And I tried to hide behind a cactus.
Oh, yeah.
And they caught me.
What was that statement like? Hey, Tom, what'd you just do?
They followed me. They knew exactly. I mean, they could see my face. As soon as I put it in my mouth, I was like, no. No. If I swallowed that, it was going to come right back up. So didn't happen.
What do you love about restaurants?
Good question. Right. When I was working in restaurants, when I first started working in restaurants, I think why I was so attracted to it is
Because how many restaurants do you have right now?
I only have 5.
Yeah.
Only? No, but there's people that have a
Yeah,
lot
there's
more
a
than
ton. Yeah.
that. And one of them is right next door. Anyway. So the flip side of having ADHD and being really scattered is being hyper-focused on something.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the kitchen. And so also, all that frenetic energy that's in the kitchen, that actually worked for me. I was able to, that calmed when I sleep at night, I put headphones in and put a podcast in. I need something to hear, or I can't sleep.
No shit.
And so the kitchen just, when the busier it got, the more focused I became. Mm-hmm. And so I just felt like it was a good place for me. But what I like about them now is like really great restaurants. They can be transporting. Like I remember Boulay. He just passed away this past year. But his restaurant on Duane Street, he would put all these apples in these baskets when you walked in. And so when you walked in, you just got this scent in the fall. You get this scent of apples. And his restaurant was very French. And literally, you walked from Duane Street, and you walked in, and you were transported to some restaurant in the French countryside for the 2 hours that you were there, and then you were back on the street in New York. So I think restaurants can do that. But also restaurants, I think what we saw when restaurants closed during the pandemic is that restaurants are often hubs of the community. It's where you go and celebrate birthdays and anniversaries and communions and things like that. And also, they just become a hub for the community. It also keeps communities safe because restaurants are open late and those lights are on late at night. And so, restaurants can do a lot. The proudest work that I've ever done, managed to do a lot in the short time I've been on this earth. When restaurants were closed, we formed, a bunch of chefs and restaurateurs formed the Independent Restaurant Coalition and successfully lobbied the government to give us $48.6 billion for independent restaurants. And it was a years of work. It started out with like 12 of us and then quickly mushroomed to chefs all around the country.
I got the call.
On Zoom calls, twice a day first, and then we cut it down. And so I remember right when the pandemic hit, I got a call from a friend of mine who worked for an agency and said, "Listen, we have some money in our agency and we'd like to help." I'm like, I don't think you have enough money in your agency to help. I also co-founded an organization called Food Policy Action. So we would go to Congress, we'd go to Washington, and we would grade Congress on how they voted on food issues, whether it was hunger, farming, fishing, clean water, things like that. So I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, and a guy who I worked with called me up right after that and said about something completely separate. And I half-jokingly said, I think our industry needs some lobbyists. And he said, well, I know some guys who can help you. And so I called my buddy back. I said, I think I know you can do it your money. So that afternoon, we hired a hobbyist, and we hired a comms director, and went to work, and very quickly went from 15 of us to 250 of us, and really, it was just a great experience.
I learned so much about the political system.
It was great, and luckily for us, restaurateurs were on both sides of the aisle, and so they all knew people. Our friend in Mississippi, knew the senator from Mississippi who wrote the bill on the Senate side, and Earl Blumenauer, who's a Democrat in Portland, Oregon area, wrote it in the House. And so we had bipartisan support on both sides, and just, it worked. It worked.
It did.
Absolutely worked. The only mistake we made, and this kind of still bothers me to this day, is right before the bill was written, and we kind of worked it off of income replacement. So whatever income you lost was replaced. And right before this thing went, it got pushed into some other legislation. And I all of a sudden thought, we should discount this whole thing by 50%. So whatever money you're going to get, and there was a process you had to apply. And also the way it worked out is that veterans, women, and minorities got first crack at it at the portal once the portal opened up. And then we were sued, and they had to change that. I thought if we had discounted it, you would get half the money. So if you were eligible to get, say, $500,000, it would have been $250,000. And the reason I wanted to do that was because even though we lost all that income, there was no food cost, there was no labor cost, right? So I thought we could discount it, and it was too late, and it kind of bummed me out because we knew it wasn't enough money, even though it sounds like a ton of money. It wasn't enough, and we were told, listen, we'll get a second bite at it, but that didn't happen. And so I think we've been able to take care of more restaurants because a lot of restaurants that did apply didn't get money, and some restaurants got a lot.
Yeah.
And so that was the only disappointing thing. But it was so much fun to do, and we all did it over Zoom. We never had to go to Capitol Hill.
No, it was a lot though.
It was fun. I wish we had a writer during the whole time following us and writing the story.
Yeah,
it's a great story.
I mean, I had to learn a lot. Yeah. Because I'd never got on the phone with a congressperson or a senator.
And the other cool thing is chefs like myself and Andrew Zimmer were doing a lot of national spots, but in every state we had chefs in every state, I think, except for South Dakota. They were all doing local news hits. So the amount of earned media that we got, was just tremendous. Yeah.
It was good.
It was fun.
All right, real quick. Yeah. What's your favorite concert?
Well, my first concert was Led Zeppelin, 1977. I was 15. It was awesome. And I got to see the reunion show too. That was good. We caught a show here. We caught the Grateful. We caught Dead and Co. here. Yeah. That was fun. But I still think the Zeppelin show was probably, there's a couple of Springsteen shows that I saw that were hitting 4 hours. Those were good shows. And I'm friendly with some of the band members.
I never got the Springsteen bug.
Oh man, live he's so good. He's so good.
I hear that.
It's great live. Anyway, also 4 hours. My recent favorite has been Jason Isbell. He's a hell of a musician, a great storyteller. And I got to know him a little bit over the years. Want to open up the questions?
Yeah.
All right, let's take some
Christy,
questions.
you got a whole, like, we're going to ask some questions. I know we asked, Open Table gives us this amazing little
Remember,
trinket thing.
Not the best restaurant in Houston. I don't know what that restaurant is. Don't ask that question. What's the first question on there? What's the best restaurant?
How has Kristen changed Top Chef?
Kristen's great. You know, I think what's really changed is that because she was on the show and she won, there's a certain empathy that she has, that she, and I think a certain rapport that she has with the contestants. Even though we really are not allowed to interact with them unless we're on camera, but there's a certain rapport that she seems to have with them that's a little different than we do. And she's also, I just absolutely just love working with her. She has a sweet tooth that you couldn't imagine. We have the candy buffet at judges' table. Every judge's table, there's an array of especially gummies of all sorts all over.
What's the most memorable part of your career? Like the thing that's like, you're like, this was. I mean, pick one of the 8 Beard Awards. Let's get past that.
Well, the first one was good. I mean, Beard Awards was, one year I got a few, but I was on stage, shared a stage with Henry Winkler. And it was a trip because he was doing a play in New York, and he would come to Gramercy a lot for lunch. And so I got to know him a little bit. And because he was in New York, they asked him to present. And I was presenting an award with him. And I had won, I think Kraft won that year for Best New Restaurant, and I think I won that year for, I think the book won that year too. So anyway, so he said, we're on the side before we go on, we're waiting to go on, and he said, listen, I'm gonna just throw stuff out there, just like work with me. And I was like, okay.
Just work with me.
I'll work with you, whatever. And so he gets up there, and he's starting to announce the award, and he goes, oh, Tom, you know, I was at your restaurant last night, and I had this dish, and it was so, and so I realized what he was doing. I was like, Henry, we got the award. He goes, yeah. And so he starts with the award again, and he goes, and then I had this dish and this dessert, and he goes, I said, Henry, we got an award. And he did it the third time. And I was like, all right, Henry, we got to do this now. So we had this little thing going back and forth. So that was fun being on stage with, you know, Henry Winkler. And,
I mean, you don't get that too often, you know?
No, but I don't know. The chefs who have come out of the kitchen kitchens that I've worked in, going on to do great stuff, like David Chang and Marco and John Benno and all those guys. I mean, I get a real kick out of that.
I mean, you've had a lot of chefs come through your kitchen. Yeah. A lot. Yeah. I mean, just like you just dropped some names and like that just.
Yeah, but that because that's kind of legacy building, I guess, a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, I still, there's a lot of non-cooking things, like, my kids being born and all that great stuff.
Let's go out here. I see a hand. There's a microphone coming towards you.
Coming to you.
Chef, thanks for being here. We certainly appreciate it. You talked about some of your advocacy work and political stuff. Do you see any possibility of you in politics in the future? That's number one. Number two, from an industry perspective, and we're seeing it here locally, and I think we're seeing it across the country, we're seeing a lot of money pour in top high-end restaurants. We're also seeing a lot on the lower-end, fast casual, convenience, speed, etc. Seems like the middle's really getting squeezed. A lot of the family restaurants and things like that are really getting squeezed.
Yeah.
What do you see for the future in terms of the industry from a economic and business perspective?
Yeah, we could spend a whole day on this. It's tough. It's getting tougher and tougher. Obviously, with inflation, food prices have gone up. The only way for a restaurant to succeed, we have to pass those costs on. I mean, margin, most restaurants, if you squeeze out 10%, that's great. Most restaurants are doing 2% and 3%. Yeah. So it's been tough. Rents are going up. And you're right, a lot of money, a lot of restaurants you'll see are opening now when you get a developer that's coming and developing a large building where it's mixed use, maybe office, maybe residential, and they want you there. But those are good for some restaurateurs, some chefs, because the developer will build a restaurant for you. So that's working out, but the mom and pops are going to continue to get squeezed. It's tough, and it's hard to find. Right now, it's hard to find capital. The one great thing about Top Chef, I think, is that a lot of the chefs that get pretty far, they actually have access to capital where they wouldn't have had it before. Especially women and minorities, which has always been the big barrier to entry for women and minorities to open a restaurant. And so that's changed a bit. I think that's one thing that we're really proud about. Every chef, restaurateur I talk to, it's just getting harder and harder. As far as running for office, I've actually been recruited, and I was like, and
Man, I'm
I live in Brooklyn, but I have a house out in Long Island, and I would run out there, but my wife said she would not support that. I don't know. There's a piece of me that I've been to DC. I would spend, once a month I was there, and I would have meetings, and so I saw how the sausage was made there. I prefer the sausage that I make in the restaurant.
That's a true statement right there.
Yeah.
I don't know how politicians do it.
Here's the thing.
don't know.
Over the years, I've met a lot of politicians on both sides of the aisle, and I have to say most of them are there for the right reasons. Not all of them. Most of them are there for the right reasons. They really do care. I mean, for me, during the pandemic, I got used to being home, and I'm home most nights, having dinner with my kids. My wife, we sit down at the dinner table. It was the way I was raised, and I didn't have that experience with my first son, my 32-year-old, and it's really important to me. And so the idea of having to live in D.C., because they're not going to move down with me, there's no way I would do that. No way. So it's not going to happen.
So I'm going to ask this one because it's kind of they just announced Michelin here last week, right?
That's good.
When I grew up, Michelin, in Europe, it was a different thing, right? What's your take on the non-traditional restaurants earning stars, i.e., barbecue, Singapore, street food, tacos, all that?
This is the problem I have with Michelin. So
Let's roll it up.
I have a lot of problems with Michelin, and at this point in my career, I don't care anymore.
Yeah. Yes.
We got a star at Kraft when they first came.
Yeah.
Right? And I was at the party that night, and someone stuck a microphone in my face and said, "What do you think of Michelin being here?" And the first thing I said, "It's great." I said, "But I grew up, working in the States where I grew up in New York, dreaming of New York Times stars, not Michelin stars. But I said, if Michelin stays here, that will change, and chefs will start dreaming of Michelin stars in the States." Well, they took offense to that. Last year I lost a star. Following year, no star. And so, whatever. But I have a hard time with it because the Michelin-starred restaurants in France, to get 3 stars, it was a restaurant, they said you have to go out of your way for it. That was the whole idea behind it. And a 2-star was really great too. But also, when you opened up, it didn't matter who you were, you got 1 star first. And you had to get 1 before 2 and 2 before 3. You couldn't open and get 3. And also, the chefs that got 2, and if you read Burgundy Stars, Bernard Loiseau, who killed himself over Michelin stars, talked about how he had to work to get to 3, and once he got to 3, he was terrified he was going to lose a star. And you started seeing some chefs like Alain Sandarin, who had l'Orchestra in Paris, who gave away his stars, didn't want them. Because at the time, the criteria was you had to make the dish and it had to be so consistent and it had to always be on the menu, so the chefs wouldn't create. They would just work on a dish, and once it was on the menu, it'd never come off the menu. And he was like, I don't want to do that, so he gave the stars away. I have a hard time with a pizzeria getting a star. Not that it's a bad pizzeria, and it should get something, but it's not a Michelin star. Like, I don't think Michelin was set up to do that, and I find it very strange. And the other problem I have with it is, there's no transparency. I would love to know how many reviewers, because my understanding is only about 3 in New York. And how many restaurants do we have in New York? And you're going to tell me they get to those restaurants once a year?
No.
Now, I know the write-ups that I had were the same write-ups for 3 or 4 years in a row. And I'm like, I call up and say, because you can call them up. Like, I haven't served this dish in 4 years. Why is it in write-up? And then they shuffle papers around and go, oh, well, and they give you some lines. So I'm not a big fan. But it's great that it's coming. That said, it's great that it's coming here because what they're telling you is that there are enough great restaurants here for Michelin to be here. So it's great for the restaurant community for Michelin to come here. So I'm mixed about it.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. Anyway.
Look, I don't have restaurants, so it don't matter. So.
You're smart.
Yeah.
So it's a weeknight, and you've got to make dinner. And
I'm laughing because I knew this was coming. But usually people say it's Tuesday, not a weeknight.
No, it could be honestly any day of the week. Let me rephrase.
Yeah.
You haven't cooked in a while, and you want to do it for yourself. Maybe you're cooking for other people, but you want to make yourself feel good, and you're cooking something. What are you gonna cook?
Pasta.
Yes.
Yeah?
That's a great answer. But what kind?
I would make pasta probably most nights of the week, but my wife, she gets too much carbs and it's not good. So, but no, it's easy, it's fast and it's easy, and But that said, I don't. Usually the question is, it's Tuesday. What are you cooking? And my answer is, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know until I see it.
Is it like a carbonara? Is it a pantry
No,
pasta?
no,
or are you
no,
buying
no.
a protein? And...
It's usually a combination of whatever leftovers are in the refrigerator and whatever vegetables are in the refrigerator. Listen, if I'm by myself and I really don't feel like doing much, cacio e pepe is really easy.
For some reason, I have an entire guanciale in my refrigerator right now. The whole damn
I
sheet.
try always to have guanciale in the refrigerator. It's like
but
one
then
of
I
those.
also have packages of little ones because, like, yeah.
In case you want like a little pasta.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like I'm a big fan of Roman style pastas.
Yeah,
so.
I am too. I love it. Yeah, guanciale is a good one.
God.
Allegricia is a good one.
I don't know
Yeah.
why I needed a 9-pound piece, but yeah.
You never know when 20 people are going to show up.
I'm telling you. What is the quintessential thing in New York? Is it a deli? Is it like the one thing that you have to take somebody to, like, to see that's not just like, let's get a dog and a slice, but like, is there something that says this is New York?
It used to be like Dean and DeLuca.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Used to
places
be.
like that, yeah. Go to Rockefeller Center, and there's a lot of great restaurants in Rockefeller Center now.
Yeah.
It's called The Rock. A restaurant called Le Rock. It's a French, big brasserie. The chefs are really good, Riyad and Lee. So I think that would be a great choice. Doing something in Rockefeller Center would be great. And they just did a whole redo of all the restaurants in Rock Center, so there's a lot of good choices there. That would I think be it.
We went out there last year. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great
Yeah.
for the holidays. Awesome.
Yeah, and nice,
Awesome experience.
The skating rink's there, the tree's there. It's going to be crowded. It's going to be fun. But yeah.
I see a raised hand. What you got? There's a mic. Bingo.
You mentioned your mom's sauce a minute ago, but I wanted to know, like, when you growing up, like, who was your inspiration? Was it your mother? Was it your family? Was it? My mother was the best. I was the baby of 6. My mother's the best cook in the world.
Yeah. My mother was a good cook, but I don't know if that was my inspiration. She was a good cook, still is. I mean, she's still alive. The early food memories are more associated with my grandfather. The smell of peppers and onions frying in the mornings before we would go fishing, because he would make a peppers and onion omelet for sandwiches, for breakfast sandwiches. So those kind of, and for me, it wasn't so much about the actual food. It was more about celebrations, like holiday celebrations where there are a lot of people around the table. I think was more important, more informative than one particular person.
Is there a dish that you grab, like that you?
Well, every
at
Sunday-
the very beginning, you were like, "This is why I want to do this."
No. Because I mean, the dish that someone asked me, "What's the last meal you want to have?" It's Sunday gravy. Sunday gravy and gravy. It's red. We call it gravy. And,
Yeah.
And it was a marinara sauce, and so you fry meatballs and sausage and braciole and put that in the marinara sauce. Then it becomes a gravy. But that was every Sunday we had that. And
See, I didn't grow up with that, and now I make it all the time.
yeah, Sunday gravy. That was every Sunday. But I don't know if it wasn't a particular dish that I was like, that made me do it. It was just this idea that it came easy. It was something that I was good at.
Yeah.
And it was something that I, at one point, had to make it. So it's in the book, so I'll talk about it. So when I was working at Gotham, the second time around, I went through a breakup with a longtime girlfriend. I was living in an apartment by myself, doing more and more drugs, and we ended up in Harlem one night, got a bunch of drugs, and went back to his apartment or something. I woke up in the morning with my T-shirt covered in blood, and don't remember getting home. And what was scary about that was I was driving a motorcycle. And I woke up that morning and looked at myself in the mirror and said, that's it. And I wasn't addicted to drugs, but I was doing a lot of drugs that were addictive. And it was heading in a bad direction, and I just stopped everything. And that was the end of it. And part of it was this idea that I found this thing that I was good at, and I'm going to blow it, and I may end up dead.
Yeah.
But I certainly can't continue doing what I was doing. And I just stopped everything.
I mean,
And so for me, it was really about this idea that I figured I was talented at something, and I had to push myself to overcome that, and to really take that as far as I could take it. So I don't know if it was one particular thing.
yeah. I mean, that's great.
It just didn't happen that way.
It's
just-
amazingly that sitting here talking to you, I see like the similar, like I have the same thought process on that thing. So it wasn't one thing, but this is what I was good at.
Yeah, I was good at it, and once I was good at it, I was like, all right, let's do this. I was also singularly focused on from the age of like once I hit like 17, 18, everything I read, every book that I read was food, and then you'd have to travel. Right, like back then, the internet wasn't around, so you couldn't find someone's food on the internet. You had to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And you'd save up your money and go out to dinner, or save up your money and travel somewhere. And but I was just a singular focus. I mean, I don't think I had a Thanksgiving or a Christmas that I wasn't working from the age of 18 to 30 something.
I was telling my parents like we're gonna do Christmas in like third week of January.
Yeah. No, now I do it. Now I don't. I'm home cooking Christmas Eve.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What you got?
Reality TV is not my thing at all. Top
Same.
Chef is the only reality TV that I watch. But with that, one of my favorite episodes from the Houston was in Galveston when that storm moved in.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do you deal with the real world when you're literally doing these things? That episode, you literally had to move inside.
Yeah, you scramble around. There is listen, they're looking at the weather, especially down here. They're looking at the weather a couple days in advance, tracking it, and then
That doesn't mean
there's a
anything.
backup. Yeah, no, but there's a backup. Actually, when we shot in Charleston, they had to do a treasure hunt, and
I
they were out
remember
in a
that.
hurricane. An
That was
actual-
crazy.
That was pretty wild. But yeah, there's always a backup plan.
Our shoot was like the high school football thing. Remember how long that was?
Yeah,
That was like a 19-hour shoot. It felt like.
yeah, probably.
Well,
There's-
somebody forgot something, and it was like they had to go back to home base was at the stadium,
Yeah.
right? And go back, and it was the first Monday night game, it was a primetime game, Thursday night game at NRG, and they had to work their way back into the stadium
Oh.
to get stuff, and then fight 5 o'clock traffic back out to wherever the hell we were, Tomball? Yeah, it's just way out there, man. I don't know about that, but we got there in the morning. I think I got home at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, there used to be, Judge's Table used to last a long, long time, and then we kind of figured a way to shorten it up.
I enjoyed it. So
It's fun.
you ever need a fill-in, let me know.
I'll let you know.
I just throw pitches at him right now. What you got?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you both very much. This is very enjoyable. But as a parent of a child who has ADHD and gets hyper-focused in the kitchen, I just wholeheartedly appreciate your candor with everything tonight and your book. So thank you very much. Also, as someone who just eats in restaurants and has never worked in them, I want to just say thank you to both of you for what you are doing for the people who serve us every day. So listening to you both up on stage, I can't help but think, Tom, how you're mentoring these amazing chefs and giving them opportunities, and Chris, you're keeping them around and keeping them mentally healthy. Thank you both so much, because I really like eating and I don't like cooking. So please don't stop what you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, the work that,
We're going through the book. To my surprise, you write about Southern Smoke in there.
yeah, there's the work that Chris is doing, and there's I think another organization out of Atlanta that's doing something very similar.
Giving Kitchen.
Yeah, Giving Kitchen, right. It's so, besides actually taking care of people, what it's really done is given the permission structure for chefs to say, I need help.
Yeah.
And that's even more important, because for years, you just deny it. You just try to run away from it, you try to hide, you drown yourself in the bottle, you know, drugs, and you don't ask for help. And I think knowing that someone there that is there to help, I think more and more chefs are gonna say, I need help. So that's I think the real sort of unsung part of what you're doing. That's like so helpful.
I saw somebody over here. Yeah.
So Tom, you mentioned that you garden. Is there a specific ingredient that you grow at home that just gets you going?
Fava beans. I grow favas, and they're really good. Yeah, that's fun because they're a real pain in the neck.
I was literally gonna be like tomato.
No,
this,
tomatoes
that.
are easy. They grow.
Favas.
No, tomatoes grow, and there's a lot of them. But you know, favas are fun. Like peas, and I like the spring stuff. You know, But I don't know, I grow a lot. I have raspberries, blackberries grow the size of my thumb. We have 3 different kinds of raspberries. And then we have currants, gooseberries. I have some apple trees now, but they're still not producing apples. And then I usually do peas, fava beans, garlic. In fact, I have to plant my garlic soon. And
You're running down a to-do list.
beans. There's tomatoes. There's peppers. A lot of different varieties of peppers. Usually 3 or 4 different varieties of eggplant. What else? I grow a lot. And the only thing is, because our shooting schedule now is mid-August, I don't plant for the fall, which kind of bums me out. But and I don't harvest after mid-August, which is like the best time to harvest. So I have to have neighbors come and just like pick through the garden. But yeah, every year I change things up.
Hey, Chef. So over the years, there's been subtle tweaks and changes to the format of Top Chef. So going forward into future seasons, maybe even this past season you just wrapped up, what changes or tweaks do you think you would like to see going forward? And are there any locations you have not yet filmed you'd love to go to? And then secondarily, can you talk about that new restaurant concept that you briefly mentioned and
Sure.
what and where and when and all that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Hudson, New York. So it's about 2 hours out of the city. Working with the guy who's developing a 50-room hotel and restaurant, and so working on that. Conceptually, I have no idea. We're still a good 2 years away, so I have no idea.
So pretty up there, though.
But it'll be farm to table based on the local food around Hudson County. In terms of format, a lot of things that we've done over the years have changed organically. I remember shooting in Chicago, and we were shooting at a outdoor walk-around event, and we're all mic still, and we were sitting on a stoop, and we were talking about the dishes. And one of the producers came over and said, "Save it for judge's table." And I was like, "But this just feels natural. Why don't you just shoot it now?" So they brought a camera over and they actually shot it. So that became the mini deliberation that we were able to cut out of the judge's table. So we also noticed that we were saying the same thing 3 times. Like we would eat, make comments, go to judge's table, make comments, bring them out, Q&A them, send them away, make comments again. It was just too laborious. And so that was able to cut out one step. And it just also felt natural that we were doing it in the moment. But then recent changes where they, halfway through the season, the quick fires get factored into the elimination, which is really tricky. And the first season we did it, we were told, like, if it doesn't make much of a difference, then don't worry about it. And then it just became a question as to when we were going to apply it and when we're not. I think the viewing audience didn't understand what we were doing and when we were going to do it. It just felt arbitrary. And so this season we tried to really focus on it a little more. And I don't know if I love it. I also don't love it because it makes me do quick fires. So, but most of the changes have been done organically. And this one, it feels a little forced, but we're working through it. And I think it's better this season. There are times I would love to see the quickfire just go. And I know a lot of the fans love it, but I just think it would give the chefs more time to focus on the elimination. I hate the team challenges. I hate that someone can go home for doing service, front of house work in Restaurant Wars. Absolutely hate that, and fight all the time about it. But I think we'll continue to evolve. There doesn't seem to be an end anytime soon, which is great. We are shooting a 23rd season. And I don't know, we'll keep going. But yeah, we'll just keep making those little changes as we go. Yeah, thanks.
Listen, you guys are great. Thank you so much.